Could I get breakfast was at 7 o'clock, so I didn't get breakfast there at the hotel. They wouldn't bring it out early. I might grab a cup of coffee or something.
Okay, folks, if I could have your attention, please. If you were in church at 8 o'clock service, then to Pastor Roger Newman. Pastor Newman is a 1981 graduate of Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary. After seminary, from seminary, he was assigned to Grace Lutheran Church in Oskaloosa, Iowa, and he has been there ever since. And he will tell you that approximately 5 or 6 years ago, he became the liaison for the Ukrainian Lutheran Church, and he is here to tell us more about our mission partnership with the Ukrainian Lutheran Church. So let's give a welcome to Pastor Newman.
Thank you. It is wonderful to be with you. Wonderful to be with fellow Christians as we worship the Lord and as we talk about what we can do to help people in various places around the world. And the people of Ukraine are very much thankful for all that you do, your support, your love, your prayers, your financial support and such that the Synod is giving to them. They asked for if I had some handouts, and I do have this one that has a bunch of names and times on there. If we just want to run through that very quickly. The history of Lutheranism in Ukraine. Christianity came to Ukraine in 988 with St. Vladimir. He came from Constantinople, so he brought with him really Orthodox Christianity, and there are many statues and monuments to him in the capital city of Kyiv. During the time of the Reformation, Martin Luther and Philip Melanchthon taught at the school in Wittenberg. Two of the students were Stanislav Olkowski and Martin Krupski. Both of those moved to Ukraine and brought Lutheranism to Ukraine at the time, or very shortly after the period we know as the Reformation. To understand the situation in Russia, or in Ukraine with regard to Russia, you really go back in history, and it's just, Ukraine was like the football that was tossed back and forth between countries. That territory was governed, go back to the time of the Vikings and the Moors coming in and different things like that, to the time of the 17th century when Russia controlled about half the country, Poland controlled about the other half, then Germany came in and controlled for a while, and Russia made a decree, if you want to call it that, that there would be only one religion that the Russian people would worship and practice, and that would be Russian Orthodoxy. And so, for whatever reason, there was a deep dislike, probably that's too mild, but I'll just leave it at that, between Russia and Lutheranism. Putin once made the comment that the worst person in the world was Martin Luther. He caused all the problems that the world is experiencing today, Martin Luther. And so that helps us understand why in 1939, when Russia overtook the country, that they outlawed Lutheranism, actually did shoot and kill pastors in the pulpits, in the churches, and basically told the members, if you worship, again, Lutheranism, we will send you off to the gulags, to concentration camps. And I say these things because I think at times we cannot imagine what it's like to live with those memories. And with every family that I know there has a story of a grandparent or a relative that was brutally treated by the Russians. And there may be some people of Russian descent here and Ukrainian descent. I'm just stating facts of history. And with the idea of the illegal to worship and practice your religion, we don't understand that. And so when people become distrustful of one another, again, it's hard for us to understand why. Y'all go to the same church, get along, you love one another, love Jesus, right? And it's like, no, it's not that way at all. And that's very difficult to come from a communist system where neighbors would tell on other neighbors and you didn't know who you could trust, to now having a congregation where make evangelism calls, to go and knock on someone's door. Never. It'll never happen. You can't do that. Because why? And it's like we just can't do that. And so as I said in the sermon this morning, one of the things that I say over and over again to them there, the gospel changed the world at the time of Jesus. The gospel can change the world now too, and the gospel can change your communities, your church, and your interaction with the gospel. And small steps are being taken. I'm the WELS liaison to the Ukrainian Lutheran Church, just a fancy word for saying that we don't have a missionary presence or a missionary in Ukraine. And so someone kind of needs to be a go-between between the WELS and the Ukrainian Lutheran Church. Would you do that? And I agreed to do that. I think it took probably 2 or 3 years for me to really appreciate the people and how they're culturally different than us. It takes time to understand why people, if you criticize, and it's not a negative criticism, it's just, why did you do this? Maybe you could have done it better that way. Immediately you're attacking them. You're attacking them, and why are you're saying we're doing it wrong. You say we don't know what we're doing. You say we're a bunch of foolish people. It's like, that's not at all what I meant. It's kind of like, well, maybe if we could try something this way or try something that way, perhaps it could help and such. But to them, it's an attack. And so I know this is with the WELS and with the ELS, who were a part of this, who started the work with the Ukrainian Lutheran Church. I think there's always been that missing of the understanding of the people and what their thoughts are and why they think the way that they do. And so that's developed over time, and I think it's gotten to the point where we probably have a pretty good working relationship. I'll just give you one example of what I mean by trying to understand them. Pastor Kokovsky in Ternopil was taking Shannon Bomey, and I took Shannon Bomey over there to do some exploratory thoughts as to how we could use mission journeys in Ukraine. And we were walking down the street, and we were coming to the building, and Pastor Krakowski goes, "This building brings me great sadness." So, okay. Why does it bring you great sadness? Because my grandfather was executed in this building. During the Second World War, the Russians held prisoners in Ternopil, and the Germans were coming, and the Russians had to evacuate. And rather than let the prisoners go, they killed them all. And he said, my grandfather was one of them, and so this building brings me great sadness. And immediately you begin to understand a little bit of their world and their life and what their life is like. And I said, so many of the people have stories that they can tell you of relatives that they never saw again, don't know what happened to them. They have a very good idea of what happened to them. But that I was doing a presentation in Michigan, and I was talking just about the things I was just kind of to get you into a feel of what they are thinking and what their culture is, so to speak. I was speaking, a lady gets up and she goes, "Everything he's telling you is true because I lived there. I experienced all that. My parents experienced all that." And she went on to talk for about 20 minutes. And just going on of all the things that their families had gone through and how just the atrocities and so on. And it was kind of like when she was done, I go, well, my work's done here. I wrap it up and go home. And so it is really good for us to understand cultures and to understand that people don't around the world do things the way we do and appreciate them for what they are doing. The same pastor took me aside one day and he says, "Pastor, you need to understand most of us have gone through so much. And it's very difficult at times for us to be interacting with people." And that's why I'd said, again, if you were at the service this morning, a little foreshadowing of what's about to come. But, greeting the people on a Sunday morning. Now, things have changed with COVID, with the handshakes and such. That's a very important part of the worship. That fellowship that we have, that bond that we have with fellow Christians. For the most part they come to worship and they go home. They don't greet the pastor, they don't greet each other. They come, they worship, they go home. And so one of the first things we did was, perhaps we love Jesus. The love of Jesus is in our hearts. And we love the people that Jesus loves. So is there some way that we can show that? And so some of the pastors started greeting the people. One in particular, a couple ladies in the congregation came up to me when I was visiting down there, and they said, "Oh, we love our pastor. He's so dear to us. He's like a son. We love him so much." He greets the people before and after the service, and all of a sudden they realized he cares about us. And it's like, wow, this is amazing. I'm going way on too long with this. Going back to the sheep. 20th century. Theodore Zelker introduced the Lutheran, or had a Lutheran congregation, Ivano-Frankivsk, in the western part of Ukraine, and at that time then the churches began to grow. They grew to probably about 200,000 members and a number of congregations there in the western part. Pastor Yarchuk, they actually have a holiday for him in their church calendar. He introduced the liturgy and the hymnal. They used the Eastern Rite. We had the Western Rite here. Basically, the Eastern Rite is a lot of repetition, a lot of different things that go into the service. And it's a very beautiful service. For Americans going there, it's like, this is going on forever. Won't this service ever end? All services are about 2 hours. And it's just, it's just the beauty of their liturgy to them, it's outstanding. They love their liturgy. And so when people come and say, "You need to change your liturgy, it's too long, people won't stay for 2 hours. You need to cut it down, have like page 15 or page 38 of the hymnal there and do that, introduce those." You're talking about their culture. You want to come in, you want to change their worship practice, their worship culture. You don't understand where they're coming from and why they appreciate that form of worship. The means of grace are there. The word is there. The gospel is there. It is just a different form of service and such. And it's a very beautiful thing to the people there, and they really appreciate that. 1939, Russia came and seized the country and made it all Russian, and that's when the execution of pastors and churches closed. The ULC ceased to exist in about 1944. 1991, they became independent of Russia. A little world history here, you all know that for the most part, but just review. They became independent of Russia and now have been independent to this day. Always the threatenings now, the threatening of Russia wanting to come in and invade and to seize the country. Well, they seized Crimea. They seized part of it already, so what's going to stop them from seizing more? Hopefully they will be stopped. Two churches started, Ternopil and Kiev in 1993. St. Sophia Seminary, this was under the subsidy of the ELS, and Thoughts of Faith, which is a parasynodical organization with the ELS. They served they supported them until the year 2014. In 2014, the ELS was no longer able to subsidize the work in Ukraine. So Bishop Hornpachuk, bishop simply means president. It would be like if President Schrader, who was here this morning, if he were there, he would be referred to as Bishop Schrader, just to term president. But Bishop Hornpachuk then came to the Wells and asked, can you support us? So President Schrader got together with then President Molstad of the ELS, and President Molstad said, if you can do it, we give you our blessing. And so in the year 2014, Wells sent $75,000 of subsidy to Ukraine to finish off that calendar year. And then they asked for a bare bones budget. How much do you need to exist and to be able to support your pastors and your congregations? And they said at least 360. And immediately the mission board cut that down to 260, and then another 10,000 was taken off. And in the year 2015, we supported them with $250,000 annually for their budget to be used to support their pastors, rental facilities, mileage, and all the other expenses that they would have there. It's a meager amount, but it's gotten them by. And then they are on a sliding scale towards self-support because that is their goal, to become self-supporting. And so now we are sending $210,000 annually to support them, and hopefully that number can continue to come down as the churches grow, which is our prayer for them to do. And so that is just a very brief look at the history there. Now what you all been waiting for, the pictures. First thing people will ask, my nifty pointer. First thing people will ask, where's Ukraine? And I say, that's really easy, it's just south of Nebraska. There we go, I still have your attention, all right. Ukraine is about the size of Texas. 44 million, the second largest producer of grain in all of Europe, and probably one of the worst economies of Europe. So how do you make sense of that? How can they produce so much and be horrible in their economy? Corruption. Corruption is rampant in Ukraine. They know it, they understand it, they wish it weren't that way, but it is that way, and so it is just a terrible situation there with the corruption. And I could cite so many examples that would just be amazing for you. Please, where are we at? Go on. What's that? On the podium. There, oh, okay. I'm in control. Oh, wow. All right. Okay. Ukraine, obviously. You got Russia, borders there. Moldova also with Russia. Now Belarus, they have not allowed Ukrainians to cross their border. So Russians have troops here. They have troops all along this border. They already seized Crimea, so you notice even on the map here already they have it in Russian control. Ukraine views Crimea as occupied territory. That is their territory, but it's occupied. And they also, Russians have troops along the border here. Ukraine is not going to attack anybody. If they attacked Russia, it would be such a one-sided battle, although their military is getting better. So why in the world do they have this threat at their borders and all the way around the borders? I don't know, and don't understand that. Kyiv, the capital city. Some will pronounce it Kiev. Anybody know why it's pronounced Kyiv instead of Kiev? Kiev is the way the Russians pronounce it. And if you pronounce it Kiev, you're like Russian, and that's an offense to us. It's Kiev, and so it's Kiev. I made the mistake only once. Kiev, we have the main church, you would say the main church there. Go off a little bit, Malin, Radisville. Go off a little bit, we had a church in Rivne, some unfortunate circumstances happened there. Come down the road to Kremnitz. Kremnitz is where we do a lot of the pastors' conferences, their synod convention. Their synod convention is called a Sobor, S-O-B-O-R, a Sobor. They have it every other year, they have a pastors' conference, and then the next year they have a Sobor. This year, in about a week or so, I was to go to Ukraine on Thursday, but COVID has rose up again there. They had to cancel services in a couple of the churches, so the bishop said, probably not a good time to come. I said, fair enough, we will not come. Then to come down to Ternopil, not Chernobyl, but Ternopil. Chernobyl's right up here. Right there's Chernobyl. Church there in Ternopil. Then come down to Ivano-Frankivsk. And you won't see it on this map, Lazarivka. It's a very, very small village where they have a church. Coming down over here to the Odessa area, just north of Odessa, we have Ivanica. We have Kherson and not Malin. Can't think of it. Getting old. And Mykolaiv, where there is a German community and there's a German church of that area. Coming on up around, we have Tokmak, and that's where they just got a new church building. Zaporizhia, then coming up here to Kharkiv. I was to go to Kharkiv when I went there, and you kind of notice how close you are to the Russian border. If you're watching the news, Donetsk is where all the stuff is happening there. And again, it's really easy to understand if you understand the history. 1992 or 1932 and 33, the world, it was announced to the world that there was a great famine in Ukraine. And 100 million people starved in that great famine. Excuse me, 10 million. 100 million was the number of deaths over the course of the years from 1920 on at the hands of the Russians. 10 million people died in the Great Famine. There was no famine. The crops were wonderful that year, but the Russians said that if you had more than 4 grains of wheat in your house, you would be executed. So they cleaned the house out of food and everything, and the world reported as the Great Famine and how sorry we are for the people of Ukraine and send your contributions and so on. It wasn't a famine. And what came out of that was the Russians took pictures. And so they had pictures of the atrocities there. And there is now, and I think I have in one of my pictures here, the Holodomor, which talks about that. But, okay, if you have, in this area, you have all these people that have died, the Russians brought their people in and they inhabited these areas and they were living there. And then in 1991, the whole country is Ukraine, and the people living here say, wait, we're Russian. We're not Ukrainian. We're not going to listen to any Ukrainian ruler and things. And that's where you have all the skirmishes. And also I'd mentioned in a sermon, it's estimated that as many as 75% of the adult males are alcoholics. And so if you have 75% of the male alcoholics and you put guns in their hands, nothing good is going to come out of that, and nothing good has been coming out of that. The news has ceased to really report a lot of this, but there are deaths every week. There's little struggles and things that are going on there. And many think it's just that Putin's waiting for an opportunity to say, I have to go down and protect my people. And he'll invade and then take over that area of the country. We don't know. We'll see what happens with that. A little picture of the downtown Kyiv area. In many respects, it's pretty modern. 7 million people is what's estimated to be the population of Kyiv. There is a church that is recently been, I think it's been 3 years now since the church in Kyiv was built, 3 or 4 years, and corruption. Church in Kyiv. In the downtown area of Kyiv, prime real estate, prime property. So the church is built. We have the dedication service. President Schrader was there for the dedication. About half a year later, water's not working. What's the deal here? The water was cut off to the church. So they call the water department and says, oh no, it's not cut off to the church. The problem must be on your end. It's like, no, there's not a well here that's supplying the water to the city. The water from the city is supplying the church. And for over 3 years now, the water has not yet been turned back on. So why is that? Oh, you have to fill out the right documents. And when you fill out one document, there's still one more that you have to sign. And come back next month when we will have someone here that can fill that out. Next month, I'll come back in another month when we can do that. We can't do it right now. And so it's put off and put off and put off. They want a bribe. They want $1,000. You know, here's $1,000. Can you hook it up? You'd probably have water in the afternoon. That's what I mean by corruption and bribery. Pastor Lyra and I have some heart issues. And the doctor says to me, I can get you in tomorrow. Says to Pastor Lyra, I can get you in 2 months from today. He's saying, well, we've got the same condition. Why can he get in tomorrow? I have to wait 2 months because I bribed the doctor. And so the doctor let me in. If you have a lawsuit, you had better bribe the judge because you know the other side did. And if you want to have any chance at a favorable ruling, you had better bribe. Roads are horrendous. Get off the main ones. Main ones are fairly decent now. Get off the main roads are horrendous. We would call them states, they call them oblasts, I believe what it's called, and each one has funds for repairing their roads. But when it comes time to repairing the roads, there's no funds. Someone has embezzled it, and the funds are not there, and so you have the corruption that continues on in Ukraine. Whoops, I guess I'm not going to turn anything with this. There we go. A hotel. This is the one that we stay at when we're in Kremnitz. Yeah, not bad. So, I'm not sure what my bill was for last night, but hotel room in Kremnitz, take a guess? $20. $20 in Kremnitz. In Kyiv, it's a lot more. Here we go. That's Bishop Hornpachuk. We talk every week on Thursday mornings. The treat there, hot dogs. That's always our lunch whenever we're traveling. We stop and get a hot dog. And they have the bread hollowed out in the middle, and then they say, you want ketchup and mustard or whatever you got on it. So they'll squirt a little ketchup and mustard on the inside, and they'll throw the hot dog into the bun. And that is their hot dog. And they just love eating those things. And they're good. They're good. They're a hot dog. We have on the interstate the gas stations and such. That's one of their interstate gas stations. The meal there, because always people want to know about the food. What is typical Ukrainian food? I don't know. Eat a lot of sausage, eat a lot of cheese, eat a lot of pork, eat a lot of chicken, fish, but not much beef. Which leads to the question, they have McDonald's, and McDonald's are hugely popular in the cities. Kids just love going to McDonald's. Not a lot of beef in the country, so what's in those Big Macs? What's in those quarter pounders? And no one has given me an answer to that. It's like, okay, I'm a little suspicious. I'll go with the fish sandwich. Yeah. So, yeah, this is a restaurant in Kremnitz there where we meet the night before conference, and Bishop's wife and Eeyore, oops, wrong one there. Eeyore, he's the treasurer there. Vasil. I talked about his wife Nina in the sermon this morning. I'll do it again in the afternoon. Some of the food. Wouldn't you just, kids, wouldn't you want to get some buckwheat and beets for breakfast? Ooh, man, that'd be just appetizing, right? Oh, yeah. So, and I think that's up some veal there. Then they take pride in their desserts. Their desserts are really pretty good. And this is some type of salads. I don't think I've ever seen lettuce in Ukraine. All their salads are cucumbers and olives and cheese and tomatoes and things like that. And here, this one has a little meat in it. Oops, wrong one. Another one of just the block of rice and such, bowl of soup. Church in Kremnitz, kind of looking out into City Square. They made here now a fountain. It looks beautiful. I haven't seen it because I haven't been to there for 2 years because of COVID, and they made a fountain outside. Is that working better? School at Brezhnevata. They worship in a house, and they usually have about 25 to 30 children at Brezhnevata for their vacation Bible school, and this is just a one room, and so they're all packed into there, no air conditioning, 95 degrees outside. You know, first day is all right, second day is hot in there, and the rest of the week it's continually hot in there. So they have their name tags and everything, and it's just neat, and kids are wonderful there. Just like here. I was telling the children on Friday when I was addressing them, I said, you are all well behaved, right? So there's no problem with that. You never get kind of full of energy and cause your problems for your teachers and things. You don't do that, right? Well, the children one day they were just full of energy and they were causing problems for the teacher. And, oh, is Renee here? Nope, she's not here. She'll probably come. Renee is a member of yours here, Billings. And she was one of the ones that went to Vacation Bible School and did that a number of summers there for us. And the kids were, and she said, I kind of got angry with them. I kind of said, stop it right now and quit talking. And afterwards she thought, oh, you know, I shouldn't have maybe done that. Well, anyway, the next morning, two of the children come up and said, we're so sorry that we hurt your feelings yesterday. We're so sorry, we won't do it again. So it's like they really appreciate us being there. They appreciate us doing things with them. This is that German church in Mykolaiv. My photography skills are as good as operating one of these microphones that I cut off the top of the church, but you get an idea. It looks like you're in northern Wisconsin or somewhere in Wisconsin, right? So inside of that church, huge potluck. Can't have a potluck without herring, right? All right. And then, of course, beets. Love the beets, deviled eggs. And some kind of cutlet there. Bread. Every meal is bread. Got to have bread, because if you don't have bread. But they eat without butter. It's really, it's like, you have a little butter. No. And then, the sausage, many different types of sausage. And it's like eating raw bacon. They love their fat. They eat fat. And fat in the sausage and things. And another one of the potlucks outside. This is at Brezhnevata, the pastor's wife and the pastor at Brezhnevata. This is Pastor Soman, who I talked about in the sermon this morning. Downtown Mykolaiv, not downtown, but a street in Mykolaiv where the church is. That's where they were, Kherson. This is where they worship in Kherson, in that building. It is a monument to the Germans that were taken off in boxcars by Stalin and taken to concentration camps. And after that, many of the Germans moved away. But there are still some Germans in southern Ukraine. And you have towns like Worms, Airport, Wartburg. You're driving through these, and I go, wait a second here. Are we going through the back roads of Germany here, or are we in Ukraine? And that is Ukraine. They have the Germans there. Yeah, that's a picture of the boxcars that they were taking off. Just a floor painting of it, memory of that. Again, you know, this lady, she probably would be referred to as a curator of that museum. She was so proud showing us all the things that are in the museum. Ukrainian soldiers. I shouldn't. We stopped alongside the road to help some soldiers fix a flat tire. They didn't have a jack. I thought, no wonder we're not winning the war here. So they didn't have a jack, so ours worked, and we were able to help them change a tire, and they were very thankful for that. Pastor Pashenko in Tokmak, we just purchased a building for him to use for worship. This is what they were using, and where the people sat and such. The circle in Tokmak. Oops, back one. This is the farmer's market. And beat up old area there. Many just farmers markets and things like that. People selling things along the side of the road and so on. This is in Zaporizhia. This is where they worship. They have one room in this big building that they use for worship. The people at Zaporizhia, the pastor there, bishop, and then one of the members of the church there, myself, and one of the gift stores there. This one. Once again, a real good picture of corruption. If you notice, they were having troubles with their neighbors. They were built a high-rise apartment here, and they made a boundary wall between the church and the high-rise apartments. You see where the wall is going as it's gradually coming further this way? It should be going straight out that way. If you cannot get a fire truck to the backside of a building, the building will be closed because it's unsafe to be in. Had they continued to go ahead and build it this way, there would not have been enough room for a fire truck to get by. And it's very possible that they would have forced us to have to rebuild that wall or do something, or they could have seized the property, the building and everything, because we were violating Ukrainian law, and that was... So they had to tear it out, which they finally did, built it correctly. Just another one of the examples. And, oops, why won't it turn away? Remnants. Anybody been to Des Moines? A couple of you. The Anderson Erickson cows? You know the Anderson Erickson cows. Those are huge, probably what, 10, 12 foot cows. One was vandalized. One of the calves was vandalized. So there's only the cow and the one calf now, but they have the cow and the two calves. Anderson Erickson is a dairy products and things like that in Iowa. So I always show this one to my people from Iowa there. I said, Des Moines has nothing on Kremnitz. You got the Anderson Erickson cow. They have the Kremnitz cow. It's quite a colorful thing, and that is it at that. So, I'm not sure how much time we have here because that is the end of my pictures and such. So, I open up for questions. Yes?
2 questions. Are there any other Protestant denominations which are trying to do work in Ukraine? That's my first question. And the second question is, with all the corruption, like for example, that church not having water, when does it get to be where it's just the price of doing business, and to wait for them to do the right thing isn't obviously going to happen? Or is it a case of they just don't want that church there?
Probably that, more so than anything else. Most every business or like the apartment buildings that are built there, they probably are being bribed, and they probably are paying the bribe because they have the money to do that. And so what the the architects and the people tell the church there is, don't pay them, because they will find another one, and they'll find another one, and they'll find another one, and you'll just be continuing to pay bribes. In Brezhnevata, we are actually building a church there, and for 2 years they were working on getting a building permit. And there was always one more paper to sign. And there is a big Orthodox church in town, and really no other church. And it's speculation that the Orthodox Church influenced the city council to stop the proceeding of the building of a Lutheran church there in that. So, the Orthodox do not play nice. They can be very vicious, and they can cause a lot of trouble for the Ukrainian church, for the Lutheran church there. Yes, there are other church bodies there. The Baptists have a presence there. Reformed Church has a presence there. Charismatics is growing. They're getting a lot of charismatics there. And there are 3 Lutheran bodies, one of which is pretty much decimated now because of just some things that were going on there. Won't get into all that, but so there are other church bodies that are there. So, questions? Go ahead.
Do you believe that the corruption is still kind of remnants of the communistic rule? Like people are kind of looking out for themselves, thinking that they're, taking bribes to kind of, just look out for themselves if something would happen, or?
That would be my guess, and yes, they learned well from the Russians, and there's whenever money is involved. Again, understanding history. In 1991, when they became independent, the Ukrainian people didn't have money. So who bought the properties? Oligarchs from Russia. They didn't live in Ukraine, but they bought the properties, so they pretty much controlled the government. And the government did what they wanted them to do. And as a result, it was just thoroughly corrupt. So they thought this new president, you may have recalled this new president, he was a comedian. And they said, oh, now we elected a comedian. Well, it can't be any worse than what it was. It was thoroughly corrupt, the government. And so it started off really good, but now they're thinking that it's kind of like going right back into that same area of corruption there and some of the rulings that are being made there. So, yeah, it's unfortunately how will you break out of it. I know the gospel can break people out of it. I know it can. It can change hearts and it can change attitudes and ways of dealing with your fellow man. Now you're always thinking everybody's crooked. Even your neighbor's crooked. Your neighbor wants something and so he does this. And difficult way to live a life when you're always fearful of some of your neighbors or things. Questions? Yeah.
So are the pastors still being trained at the St. Sophia Seminary?
St. Sophia closed in about 2016 or no, earlier than that. And there is no seminary right now. And that's the next thing that we're going to try to address is to have, they'll probably be online right now. There are 3 young people who are interested in going to the ministry because we have about 3 pastors who are in their 60s. Retirement age in Ukraine is 60. And they're in their 60s, but they want to continue on. But we realize, a stroke or something, and all of a sudden you don't have a pastor there. And we don't have anyone to fill the pulpit. Plus, there are mission opportunities. Lviv is a beautiful town. Odessa is a beautiful city. Those are areas that we could have some mission work being done, but they don't have the manpower to kind of keep up with what they have, much less to reach out. So, yes, we need to, once again, get a seminary started in some way. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Is their language a completely different language, and do we have materials published in their language?
Materials of, say that last part.
Materials that you're able to give to the people, or are they all more literate in English, or do they? I was just wondering how you communicate with them.
Pretty much all children now are taught English in school. Because they realize that a way to get ahead in life is to learn English. If you learn English, you have a lot of job opportunities and there's a lot of potential for different opportunities in their lives. So they do that. And, But otherwise, no, I have a translator every time. And yes.
So their language is different from Russia? They have a completely different language?
Let me put it this way. I went with Pastor Mike Ewert, who served 13 years in Russia. I went with him, and he could fairly well communicate with them, but there were a lot of words that they couldn't understand. So yes, it's very close to the Russian, but it's not. And so he, who knows Russian very well, had a difficult time at times understanding.
And to the Russian community there, do they have, how do they feel toward Ukraine? Are they, do they get for example, usually the Germans that were brought in to settle in Russia never got along with the Russians. Do they get along with the Ukrainians?
Not very well.
Okay.
Yeah. It's that attitude, we're not going to be controlled by the Russian or the Ukrainian government.
Right.
We'll follow what Putin says, and yeah. And that creates hostility. Another one of the things that I deal with a lot is there's a lot of hatred for Russia. And I'll say, we have to love our enemies. Jesus commanded us to do that. And then I sometimes get a reply, but you don't know how terribly they treated us. You don't know all the atrocities that they did. And yes, you're right, but maybe that's why God had me come here, to maybe help you to, be more forgiving and more loving and be able to go beyond what has happened in the past and go forward. Other things, yes?
Are there any plans of having WELS missionaries in Ukraine or in neighboring countries in the near future to support the congregations and pastors closer?
Let me get you Larry Schlomer's number. No, I would love to see something like that. That would be wonderful. I think the nearest thing that we're going to get to something like that is to try to get our seminary involved in training their people. More so because, as you know, we aren't sending that many missionaries out anymore. We're
Right.
doing more training than we are sending out. And that's kind of what's happening here in Ukraine. So sometimes when people say, was this the only WELS or only church body that WELS is subsidizing? Not really. There's a number of other ones that we're subsidizing without having a missionary there as well. Yes?
Would they respond better to their own people versus like one of us coming there, or like our missionaries being there?
Certainly.
Because they would know the culture and stuff,
Yeah.
so then that would
Yeah.
maybe change how they do things.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think a problem that both ELS and the WELS had is we tried to kind of push our way of ministry on them much too quickly, so it looked as though they had no say in what they were doing, and they had to do things that were totally strange to them and understand. For example, when I got involved, the money that was given to them in subsidy, we did their budget for them. We determined this would be where you would spend here, here, and here. And I looked at that as, why are we telling you how to use dollars for your churches? You know where it's needed more, where it's not as much as needed. You know that better than we. We're sitting way away from you trying to tell you and manage your finances. No. This is what you're getting. You bring up a budget, and just, you make your budget, and let's talk about it and see how we can make the numbers meet. And they're like, you mean we have control over our budget? Yes. You are the Ukrainian Lutheran Church. I'm not going to tell you how to do your ministry. That's another thing that we did. I told the bishop, I said, have every one of your pastors, with our evangelism programs that we're doing, have every one of your pastors outline what they think would best work in their city to have people come in to their church. Because we know going out is not going to work at this time. People are going to be very uncomfortable doing that. What are things that can work that bring people in? So they all came up with ideas. And we started doing those ideas. And they were really working. And then COVID. It just stopped everything in its tracks. There was enthusiasm in the congregation because now the people were actually helping to organize these events, which was strange to them because they didn't do that. Pastor Lyra's looking a little upset there. I think it's getting close to time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Do Do you have to fear for your safety, like when you go to Ukraine or when they hold up church services?
I never have. This one, had I left on Thursday to go, we were going to go to Kherson. That would have been the closest I would have been to the Russian border, and the closest I would have been to Donetsk. But here we have, your state patrol is hiding behind the trees on the freeway and, trying to catch speeders. There they have actual stations where indiscriminately they'll pull one over and pull another one over. Most of them they let go. And so in the stations in the western part, there's a police officer out there walking around talking and everything like that. Going to the eastern part of the country, when I went to Tokmak and Zaporizhia, all of a sudden those police officers there had machine guns. And I said to the bishop, I go, why did they have machine guns? He looks at me real stern, he says, we're at war. Well, okay, we're at war here. So, all right. So, yeah, I guess you don't think about the safety so much. You just don't go and you just trust that they will take care of you while they're there. And, yeah, the bishop hardly ever lets me out of his sight. I'm always with him, and because he says, you're our guest, we will take care of you, and they do. Anything else? You are wonderful. I did ask if I could take just a couple minutes of your time to put before you an opportunity for giving. Back in the fall of last year, I was approached by the people at Tokmak, and they said, we have this excellent building that could be used for a worship facility, turn it into a parsonage, and they also have a garage for my car. It would be ideal, can we get the money to purchase that building? At that time, there was no way in the world that I could go to the World Mission Board and ask for funds for a building. And I fully understand that, no problem with that at all. And so it was like, how are we going to do this? And then another opportunity came with the building at Brezhnevata, and another one came with the church in Kherson. The three of them all told would be about $400,000 to have 3 more worship facilities in Ukraine, from 5 to 8 of the 17 congregations that would have a worship facility. In our Lord's wisdom, He called home our son David on December 4th. David had juvenile diabetes since 3rd grade, and he died suddenly from complications with his diabetes, and it was a shock for my wife and I and for our other son, Tim. And afterwards, I said to my wife and Tim, I said, would you mind if we started a memorial fund for David to raise the funds to buy that building in Brezhnevata? And my wife and I started off with a $25,000 gift for that memorial fund. And as just a few months went by, we were well over $150,000 of gifts that people had given for the building. So we went from 1 building to the 3 now. And currently we're at about $200,000 that we've raised, with the potential of a couple more major gifts that people have pledged that they will give. So it's all within the realm of real possibility that we could do all 3 of those. And so when the Lord allows things to happen in your life that just are very, very tragic, yet, as he says in Corinthians, Paul says in Corinthians, the sting of death has been removed. It's gifts like this that have really taken the sting out of our son's death and used it in a very positive way. My wife and I and Tim can say, with the purchase of the building at Tokmak that just took place this past week, now they will have a place of worship that they can use for themselves. And through the events of our life and our son's passing, the Lord made this possible for us, and that just, it moves us. And that, so I gave your pastor some information. If you would like to make a gift for that, we would be very honored by that. President Schrader was here for the first service. I contacted him. The Ukraine committee is made up of Larry Schlomer, myself, and advisory members are President Schrader and Reverend Paul Prangy. And so I asked the committee, do you mind if I just do this in memory of our son? And within a matter of seconds, I got an email back from President Schrader. He said, by all means, we think it's a wonderful idea. God bless your efforts. And God has blessed our efforts. So if you would like more information, how perhaps you might want to give a gift for the buildings of Ukraine, that is there. So go ahead.
I just say also, I think to that fund is where, as mentioned, Ukrainian Mission is the council project of the month for the month of October. And any gifts which are given for the Ukrainian Mission, we will put into that. We'll put into that fund. So.
So thank you very much. We are very honored, and I will definitely keep you updated, because what I was going to do this time, we were going to have dedication at Tokmak and groundbreaking at Brezhnevata, and then with the anticipation of the building in Kharkiv. And I was going to go there, and I was going to have an interview with each of the pastors and what this means to them, and then send that along just to people who have given. I will definitely keep your congregation involved in what's taking place there and how your gifts are doing wonderful things in Ukraine. So I can't thank you enough for that. Thank you very much.